Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Tristan Claridge, and it's a pleasure to be with you for another session of our webinar series. Since 2020, these webinars have been a space where ideas and practice come together, where researchers and practitioners and thoughtful colleagues gather to explore what social capital is, why it matters, and how we can apply it in real-world contexts. At the International Social Capital Association, our mission is to deepen understanding and strengthen action around social capital. We do that through conversations like this, by learning alongside one another and building the very relationships that sit at the heart of this work. And if you find these sessions valuable and you'd like to stay connected, we'd be very happy to welcome you into our community. We're honoured to be joined today by Professor Dame Heather McGregor for a presentation titled Connections to Careers: How Social Capital Accelerates Progress. Heather is Provost and Vice Principal of Heriot-Watt University, Dubai, and has held senior leadership roles across higher education, including as Executive Dean of the Edinburgh Business School. Before moving into senior university leadership, she built a career spanning investment banking and entrepreneurship. Many of you will know her, if not from her work on social capital, as a long-time Financial Times columnist, Mrs. Moneypenny, where she offered thoughtful, practical insights on careers, leadership, and working life to a global audience. Within our own community, Heather is a valued board member of the association and convener of the upcoming Social Capital 2026 conference, which will be held in Dubai in March. We're very fortunate to have her with us today. Welcome, Heather, and over to you.
Thank you very much. And I'm trying to be on multiple screens at the same time, which is slightly challenging me technically. So hello, everybody. Very nice to meet you. I know some of my own colleagues are dialing into this, which is great because the more people that we can engage in this debate, the better. I want to talk today about how we can design social capital into careers development in such a way that will really speed up people's career developments. And I want to give two examples of things I've worked on, real practical things. So although I am an academic and I do teach in this area, and I have included a little bit of academic theory in this, I would mention this is more of a practical skills-based workshop. As Tristan said, we try and do webinars that look at both where academic thinking and practical implementation meet each other. The other thing, as Tristan also mentioned again, is that we are hosting here in Dubai in the building you can see behind me, the Social Capital Conference 2026, which will be at the end of March. And we really encourage everyone to considering coming to Dubai at the end of March. The weather will be wonderful. The welcome will be even more wonderful. And the keynote speakers are on another level, really. We have secured Bob Putnam, who is in the world of social capital, of course, a very, very famous, probably the most famous living scholar in the area of social capital, and is, of course, a professor at Harvard. And also Professor Raj Chetty from Harvard, who is almost certainly, I would say, for your money, is going to be a Nobel Prize winner one day. He is one of the most famous economists in the world. He actually focuses on inequality in his work as an economist. And social capital is, of course, one of the ways of addressing inequality. And that is essentially at the heart of what I'm going to talk to you about today. So it's lovely to meet you today, and I will take questions at the end of this. But I would really encourage you to come and meet me in person if it's possible at the end of March. And if you need any help with that, please get in touch. So Tristan has introduced me, so I don't need to introduce myself or talk about the context, but social capital really matters because it provides access to more and better information. It influences the decisions that people make. I mean, I know this from my own personal experience in this, that when I've served on public company boards all over the world. I currently serve on a US public company board. I don't get to be a member of those boards if I wasn't already very skilled and had the right skills and qualifications. I'm a chartered accountant, so I can sit on audit committees, but so can lots of other people. And what happens in board processes, and I see this over and over again, is that it's on a skills-based, interview-based merit until you get right at the end. And right at the end, that when all else is equal, the names come to the nominations committee, and at that point, the social capital moves one person ahead of the others. And it's because, as we have seen in previous Nobel Prize winning work, trust lowers transaction costs. And because trust lowers transaction costs, social capital trumps everything. So it empowers underrepresented groups. You can actually improve the chances of underrepresented groups by providing social capital, and accelerates growth. And this is really the difference between human capital and social capital. And I always appeal at this point to people who've studied philosophy and logic that things need to be both necessary and sufficient. And I'm a great believer in my book, Careers Advice for Ambitious Women. I say that I think these two things are necessary for a successful career. So you need human capital, but you need social capital. And one without the other is absolutely impossible. So if you want to be truly successful, you have to invest as much time and effort in your building your social capital as you do in your human capital. This is a concept completely alien to people, and actually completely alien to a lot of parents of the students that I teach. The thought that they just think the student needs to sit in the classroom and pass exams. And yet I get approaches from employers. We're one of the most productive universities in producing actuaries, saying, please stop sending me actuarial students who can pass exams but can't hold down a conversation. And those are the things that matter. We have to teach students these things as well. That the social, all these elements on the right hand side are very, very important. There are, of course, academic foundations to all of this. Granovetter's is very famous, but I mean, interestingly, Mark Granovetter's Strength of Weak Ties, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is not only probably the most famous reference in the history of social capital, it's also the most cited social science paper ever, which is saying something on the Web of Science. And it's actually subtitled "Getting a Job." So it was his PhD thesis. It was his PhD thesis that he wrote in the 1970s. He went to a particular town in America and he worked out how everyone had got their job, and he realized that even if they'd applied through an ad, they even heard of the ad from somebody else, and that people count in job seeking. Ron Burt, Nan Lin, these are all people who have written about this area and are worth seeing. But there is what I tell people is, stop whinging about the fact that it's who you know as well as what you know. There's a body of academic evidence behind this. So back in 2007, the then Vice Chancellor of the University of East London took me to his university's campus, which is in a very deprived part of East London, and 17,000 of his 20,000 students are minority ethnic in the UK. For what that means, Black and Asian students. So 17 out of 20,000 students were Black and Asian students. And they're mostly first generation immigrants, because that part of East London is where a lot of them live. And we looked together over at the skyscrapers of Canary Wharf, and he said to me, nobody from here graduates from here ever gets a job over there. Why is that? And I went and did some research into that and found that basically students were leaving there with no social capital. They were all employed after they left, but they were employed at the checkout at Tesco or things like this, and they were not advancing to the careers that they had trained for, because they didn't know anybody in those careers to help them even understand the industry well enough to know where to look for jobs. And I set up a charity called the Taylor Bennett Foundation. This is me, much younger me, with some of the trainees from that particular year, and this is a charity that still exists. You can see its website. I devised and designed a 12-week training schedule. These days, they do lots of other things as well as the main 12-week program, but they still do the 12-week program. And it was 12 weeks, or 10 weeks, as it says here, and as it is now, which is divided equally between acquiring social capital and acquiring human capital. And the course was deliberately designed for that. And also meaningful. You can't build social capital by just taking people along to a company and saying, this is Shell or this is BP or this is Microsoft. You need an opportunity for the students to engage meaningfully with the people in Microsoft and build a relationship and build connections with them. So we asked the companies that we're going to visit for projects that the students work on, and then they go and they present these things in groups, and then they take questions from the people in the and we curate the audience so that these visits to companies are actually meaningful exchanges that are designed to build social capital. And 83% of the students over the nearly 20 years that this has been in place are working in the industry for which we designed them and gave them for significant professional connections. And these are the things I think that are important in any design, that you embed social capital in the training right from the beginning, that you build peer connections, that which you as you build the alumni network. So if you're designing a career enhancing intervention, which is what I was doing here, as you go through it, you embed in people that go through it that they need to form connections with the people that are coming behind them. So as well as giving them connections with industry and connections with potential mentors, everybody on this program was given two mentors right from and still is right from the beginning. One was somebody who is in the communications industry, which is the industry we were preparing them for. And the other one is somebody in the job seeking industry, i.e., somebody in recruitment or headhunting. So they all had two people from the beginning through this 10 weeks who they saw every week. And they built a relationship with over those 10 weeks. And they also went on these curated visits to industry where they were given projects to present that we had secured from the industry. What would the industry visit people be interested in hearing about? And then they were given that project. So every week they work on a new project, and at the end of the week, in teams, at the end of the week, they go and present it to this company. And this sometimes it's the same company. We take groups of people to one company. If it's a big company like Microsoft, if they're smaller companies, we split the groups up and take them to different companies. But we also engage the alumni. So how do we deliberately, we now give a lot of these students mentors from the alumni. So when we give them a mentor from either the recruitment industry or the communications industry, they're also a Taylor Bennett Foundation alumni. And we also encourage all the alumni to come back together and build a network with each other. And we also encourage electronic network of alumni so that we can put out job ads, which even though we don't charge for that, it's a very important part of building that network. People need to have a reason to be in a network. And if they think they're going to get access to job opportunities, that's a very good reason. So peer-to-peers. And then finally, dealing with inequity in advance. A lot of these students didn't grow up in a home where they and I'm already dealing with a very small minority here because a lot of immigrants in the UK don't even go to university. But I was dealing, and we still are dealing with people coming out of university. Originally, it was just the University of East London, but after 2 years of that, we expanded it, and now this takes people from all over the UK. What they now also do is something called the PR Summer Stars, where they match people with an agency for mentoring and work experience just once a year in the summer on a very short basis. But they don't do the 10-week training program. They just are attached to work on as basically very low paid labor over the summer holiday, but it gives them connections and it gives them experience. And these two things I believe are absolutely interchangeable. So by intervening, you can change the playing field. You can change the landscape. You can right some of the disadvantages that minority groups arrive with, which is that they don't know anybody outside of their own environment. And just by bringing them into a university, for instance, I mean, you would think that somebody coming into our university here, and particularly our campus in Dubai, where we have 126 nationalities of student, would immediately give them a massive amount of social connections and social capital. But actually, people are very good, as we all know, at hanging out with their own tribe and their own people and their own language. And we have students who come here and then leave again and they speak no English until they come back the next morning and don't actually mix outside of their own cultural group. And that's not the best way. So you as trainers, we have to design this in and make it so that people make connections right across the cultural divide if you want to address recruitment inequities. These are quotes from people who've been on the Taylor Bennett Foundation very early on. I've written some academic papers about this work, and I'll probably write more in the future, but this was one of my very first academic paper. It says the program encourages you to stay at everyone and creates a massive network. If I had a problem with someone, I could easily message someone for their help. I mean, that was a position that this respondent was not in beforehand. And then networking. And by the way, I should put my hand up here. I have a horror of the word networking, and I prefer to talk about building social capital or building a network. I think network is a noun and not a verb, and we should all try and use it as that. And I think some of the issues that people have with the whole concept of networking is because of the word, and there's academic literature behind this that shows that the word has got negative connotations, and the way to deal with that is just never use it. So I just do not use it, and I'm only using it in here because this is a direct quote. Networking is something that practical networking is something we've been taught within the program, and this is, as I said, something we designed in, as in I've taken away that it's important. And prior to the program, I didn't have any idea about how to go about approaching people in industry to get opportunities, and I just didn't know anyone. So this shows you what a disadvantage it was and how this program has addressed it. So the second case study that I wanted to talk about was the Heriot-Watt University Global Leadership Program. And again, this program, which I designed, was born out of necessity. As a university, we are a roughly US dollar, about 450 million US dollar university turnover, with altogether 27,000 students across several campuses around the world and online students. Although our biggest campus is in Scotland, which is where we were founded in 1821. And the issue constantly was that we were hiring people outside the university to come in for leadership positions. And it got to the point where I think the last 10 leadership positions in the university we'd had to go outside for, and including, we have 6 primary academic units, what other people would call faculties, we call them schools, and every single head of every single school currently actually has been recruited from outside. And then we have a university executive on which I sit, which sits above all of that, which runs the whole university, and the last 6 people in university executive had all come from outside. So if this is a 3,000 employee university, if you're working away knowing that you're never going to get to the top because every senior academic and everybody on the university executive has been hired from outside, it's not very encouraging for people. People need to know that they could aspire. They need to see, you don't want all insiders, but you don't want all outsiders either. So again, the issue was a lack of leadership, and we looked, why were we hiring from outside? And it was because people on the inside didn't have the skills and hadn't got enough done during their time at the university. They hadn't managed to get things done to show what they were capable of and to show that they were capable of leading a university. Now, there are lots of other things, of course, that need to be done. They need to be rotated around. They need to, the leadership training and so on. But this business that we were not appointing from within was a real issue. And so I was asked by the university secretary to come up with a solution. And I should tell you something here I was very struck by. We do a program for a company that used to be called Schlumberger, which is probably the biggest oil consultancy in the world, where we train their top 60 emerging leaders on an MSc program that we wrote specifically for them and only is done by them. And so it's a very expensive thing to do, to have a bespoke MSc program that was, that you do exams and you get an MSc from a university, and nobody else can go on that MSc program except people from your company. And when I asked them why they had done it, and I was in charge of that program for a while, when I asked them why they had done it like that. They said they brought these 60 people together from all over the world. And in their mind, it was worth the expense of this bespoke program to bring, and they brought these people together. They had to do 2 weeks a year together, and then the rest of the stuff they did online. And it took 2 years. So they spent 4 weeks together altogether. And they brought these people together because they brought people from 60 different countries, 60 different places, and they built spectacular social capital that then helped them to get things done in Schlumberger. So I thought, well, if we're doing this for other people, why are we not doing it for ourselves? And that is what I then designed. These are this is a shocking photograph that I took on my telephone. Ravi has got his eyes shut, but these are 3 people from our first global leaders program graduating, because when you do 3 courses of our MBA, you get a postgraduate certificate in management. Now, our MBA is online, and I commend it to all of you. It's a highly accessible, very cost-effective program. So I took the 3 units of our MBA that I thought would be best, which is the managing people, managing money, which is called making financial decisions, and the leadership unit. And then we operate in 3 countries mainly at the moment: the UK, the UAE, and Malaysia. And I did a week in 1, a week in 2, and a week in 3. That's how we set it up. So, and we recruited people to this program by competitive application, and we curated the 20. So we actually, we took it on merit, but we also made sure that 50% of them were academic and 50% are professional services. And we also make sure that as we look at it, that they're spread geographically, that they're spread in terms of experience. They have to be in a particular grade, what we call our grades 8 and 9. So they're in a particular stage of their career, but the recruitment, the selection committee which is a large committee, including our global head of HR, our university secretary. So it's 4 members actually of the university executive that select this group. And we make sure we curate it to build the maximum social capital. So it has these 3 actual units of the MBA, which bear credit, and everybody said you're mad asking them to do exams on a leadership program. A leadership program wouldn't normally have exams. My point is, out of the 20 people we take into each cohort, not all of them are going to end up running the university. I mean, just by dint of a pyramid. And I want people to have something to show when they leave. And we all know that on people's resumes, they say, I've done this leadership training module and this leadership training module and this LinkedIn learning. But actually, a proper qualification from a very highly respected UK university that's a top quartile research university is something that they will be able to have for the rest of their lives. So I have insisted that the design includes exams. And they spend a week. It takes place over 12 months. They spend a week in the UK campus, a week in the Dubai campus, a week in the Malaysia campus, and they do exercises together during their time being taught. And and we bring lots of higher education examples to it, and we bring lots of senior people from the university to teach them. So the head of HR will teach on the managing people. The head of finance will teach on the financial course, and the vice chancellor will teach on the leadership program. So it is a very heavily designed course. But the important part is the building of the social capital. It's residential. I mean, obviously, if we're in Dubai, the people who live here don't stay in the hotel. We haven't enforced that yet. But but people stay in a hotel wherever they don't exist, and we do things in the evenings, and we have guest speakers in the evenings, and all of this, the stuff in between the formal teaching, is designed so the cohort is picked to deliver social capital. The bits outside of the classroom all designed to deliver social capital and to give people exposure. And a little bit like the design of the Taylor Bennett Foundation, we give them opportunities during that week to present back to the leadership of the university. And actually, when it concludes, we give them an opportunity to present back to the leaders of the university overall on what they got from the program and so on. We have been through 2 cohorts, and we've just recruited a 3rd cohort to start in May this year. I now would say, when I eventually leave the university, that this probably is the thing I have done. And I've redesigned the MBA and restored ancient buildings in Scotland, done lots of different things. But this is the thing I'm proudest of. And we do again, we go back to the alumni situation. We get the alumni to mentor the next batch of people. We get industry leaders to come back. We encourage ongoing informal networks. But the other thing we do is we as a university executive are now deliberately, when we have a project that needs doing, we reach into the GLP cohort graduates deliberately to give them assignments, and that is a result of, we know who they are. We've built relationships with them because we've seen them in action during these 3 different weeks. Now I wanted to show you, I've done some work on this. I mapped the connections beforehand and after, and they are very different. And again, the next one's before and after. And you can see, look, just these 2. This is the second cohort, before and after. Just look at the density of it. And the way I mapped them afterwards was by asking people, who have you gone to get something done? Who have you actually gone to from it? The program's finished. 3 months later, you've been doing your job. Who have you gone to that you met on the program to get something done that you didn't know before? And what I find was that in order to get things done, people have gone out to people that they have built relationships with during that program and exercise their social capital in order to get things done. And that is how you get things done in a complex matrix-driven organization, whether it's a big multinational company like Unilever or Microsoft or whatever, or whether it's a university like ours, is that you get things done by knowing who to, and trust lowers transaction costs. This is the work of Oliver Williamson, who won the Nobel Prize for Economics in 2015. And economics as a discipline is absolutely linked to social capital, and a lot of the work that economists have done on inequalities and trust, and the fact that trust lowers transaction costs. This is why I'm saying that we trust the GLP members to give them additional assignments now, because we all have a relationship with them. We've seen them in action. We know what they're capable of. And then when you trust people, and that's why people get hired. People get hired because the most expensive thing as an employer you can do in the world is make the wrong hire, because then you get somebody in and you train them up and then it doesn't work out. And so if all else is equal, and somebody has a recommendation and somebody else doesn't, and they've got exactly the same skills and qualifications in your mind, you're always going to choose the one that comes recommended, because it lowers your risk. And people should think of employment and recruitment as a risk-weighted activity. So trust lowers transaction costs. Lessons learned. Well, engineering social capital, it can be intentionally engineered and designed and delivered through structured programs. That people need to think beyond human capital. They've got to think, if they want to design programs. We now do a lot of executive education for here in Dubai. We deliver a lot of executive education to companies in the region, not just in the UAE, but also in Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Bahrain and Kuwait. And in every single case, we design social capital into those programs alongside human capital. And the final thing is about institutional strategies, is that I think that we all know that line managers have a responsibility to develop the people under them. And at Heriot-Watt, we're no different, and we have developmental goals that go into people's appraisals every year. And they're usually things like, we'll go and do a course on this, or go and do a course on that, or do you want to study for your senior fellowship of the Higher Education Academy, or whatever. But actually, it's a perfectly good development goal to say you need to build your network better with Scotland, or better with Malaysia, or better with professional services, or better with the academics, and to have that as a development goal. But then it's also up to the line manager to assist with that and to design some things, or to look for opportunities and help people. I also run a workshop here for students on building a network, I mean, you need to be able to build a network, but also manage it and also utilize it. So building it, maintain it. There's an academic reference by Forrest and Doherty on this, which is absolutely excellent, which talks about the fact you have to build and maintain and utilize a network if you want to develop your career. And that has to be taught. You have to teach people. Not a lot of people agree that you have to teach people how to build a network. Very few people would think about teaching people how to maintain it, and almost nobody would teach people how to use it. So that this question of building it, maintaining it, and using it, organizationals need to think about teaching all of those things to their future leaders, and so that when they do build a social capital, that it's actually useful to them. I mean, a very good example is LinkedIn. LinkedIn is in theory a massive piece of social capital, but we all know, I mean, I'm not on LinkedIn deliberately, but we all know that people are connected to thousands of people on LinkedIn. But if you message somebody on LinkedIn, they're not always going to answer you. And in my view, your social capital is who are you connected to that would answer your message, your telephone call, your email. If they would respond to you, then that is genuine social capital that you have. And that's how you need to measure it, by who is in that network that would actually respond to you. And again, boundary definition is a very important part of the academic work. So this is this is a badly titled slide, but teamwork, social capital impact, and career growth through networks are all things that people have encountered and very important to it. And so I think we need to design for social capital. We need to leverage technology. We need to measure outcomes. That's why I bother to measure the outcomes we measure the outcomes a lot of the Taylor Bennett Foundation. There's an impact report that you can see on their website. What I didn't do, of course, I mean, I didn't set it up as an academic exercise. I set it up as a means of helping people get better jobs. And so there was never a control. What I should have, if I was doing it as an academic piece of work, I would have set up at the same time in 2007, 2008, a control where I looked at, in the UK, at white people who were well connected, and then track their careers versus these careers and saw what happened. But obviously, I didn't bother hanging around setting up groups of controlled white people finding great jobs, because that was impractical and I was doing something practical. I was actually on this. I think it is important though to measure, and so where people are doing things, I would encourage them to get. There are loads of academics around the world working in social capital and consultancies. I would get somebody to work out a way of measuring whether you were being successful at doing it, and also encourage leaders to think about how can they create social capital for the people in their organization and line managers. Can they do it? Here are some academic references that I recommend. My own paper that looks at the Taylor Bennett Foundation, which is actually a paper presented at the Academy of Management in 2019. But the full text is available on. It's only in the proceedings, but if you want the full text, you can either write to me or it's on ResearchGate. The book by Siebert, Kramer and Leiden is very famous and highly cited. And then these are some of the more recent, more highly cited papers that actually all happen to be from 2023. But the book, A Social Capital Theory of Career Success, has been cited about 3,000 times. In comparison, the piece at the top here, How is Social Capital Formed and Leveraged in International Careers, has been cited 83 times. So these are things that I would, and there's a particular piece here about social capital in academia, which academics themselves may be interested in. So thank you very much, and I will stop sharing, Tristan, if I can work out how to do that. And here we go.
Yeah, thanks very much, Heather. Fascinating presentation. So we do have some time for some questions and for some discussion. So you can either raise your hand within Zoom, which you'll find under the React button, or feel free to post in the chat when we call upon you. If you can unmute yourself to ask your question, and feel free to engage in some discussion as well. Of course, if you're in a position where you can't unmute yourself because it's either noisy or you simply don't want to, just let us know in the chat and I'll happily read out the question on your behalf. So perhaps I can start, Heather. There seems to be a challenge with communicating these ideas, like the way you've presented them. They're incredibly powerful. I think everybody here in the audience probably already knows this is really, really important. So you're kind of preaching to people who already know a lot about it. But how can we communicate this with people who aren't familiar with it, who aren't used to thinking about it in these kinds of ways?
Yes, I find that you have to use really, I have to anyway, use really extreme examples to do this. And it's no good, as you say, I'm preaching to the choir here. We all know this is very important, but I um I've had to allow, both of these programs have been funded by outside people, and the Taylor Bennett Foundation has cost millions of pounds. I mean, I put in a lot of my own money at the beginning, but I mean, it's been funded by lots of other people who have to be persuaded and who are not social capital scholars, and probably have all got first class degrees from Cambridge and don't think that, don't give any attribution to social capital in their life and their career success. And so what I tend to do is choose really stark examples and use them to engage an audience. And my favorite example is when I talk about lawyers, and I say that if you need both human capital and social capital, and I give the example of somebody who is incredibly good tax lawyer, and they're very good at tax, and they know everything about tax, and they know how to manage tax in such a way that you only ever pay what you have to, and they maximize all the allowances for the company, and so on, so on, so on. But nobody knows them, and nobody knows that they're good at tax, and nobody, and if they're in a law firm, they'll never make partner. And if they're sitting in a company, they'll never make a senior job. But no, because nobody knows that they're good at tax and nobody knows them. Um, and then I contrast that with a lawyer who is very bad at tax and really makes lots of mistakes as a tax lawyer, but really bad at it. And everybody knows them. Everybody knows them, and everybody knows who they are. And you know what? They'll never make partner, and they will never progress either. And so one has a lot of social capital and no human capital, and the other one has a lot of human capital and no social capital. And so it's only by talking about these two lawyers that I can get anybody to understand what I mean.
Yeah. And those illustrative examples, they're so powerful in communicating what we're talking about. And the point you made at the beginning about being sufficient and necessary, I think is a really, really powerful point that you made.
Yeah, and that's the sufficient and necessary argument is, of course, logic. Anyone who has been a student of philosophy or logic, which most people have not, let's face it, will have learned that things can be necessary, but not sufficient. So this necessary sufficient argument is an argument I use a lot. I use that actually in my careers book as well.
We have a comment in the chat from Keith. Do you feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like to make that comment yourself? Otherwise, I'll be happy to read it out on your behalf. I'll read it, but feel free to jump in if you have anything, Keith. The comment is about what Heather said earlier on in the presentation about using network as a noun rather than a verb. That's being very helpful. And I'm much, much happier looking to build my network or social capital than I am about networking.
Yeah, so that argument is there's an academic reference for that too, by the way, is that there's a study that is done that finds that people have very negative, in fact, there's more than one study on this, that finds people have very, very negative connotations about the word as a verb. People think that there's something, quote, the academic work quotes as being dirty or but basically negative connotation. People don't like the idea of it at all. But if you reframe, so what I did when I was writing careers advice for ambitious women was reframe it as a noun, and I find that people that is more acceptable. Now, I haven't done, of course, a separate piece of work testing my theory, But I do tell other people to do this, and it does seem to work. And Keith, I'm delighted that you remembered that, because I think I probably mentioned that about 7 years ago to you. And but it is important. But also, I mean, Keith's a very good example actually, because he is now working in Dubai, having worked in Scotland. And it wasn't me, by the way, that picked him to move from Scotland to Dubai. It was somebody else, but he built such a strong network that when the opportunities came up, that he was in the front line for them. And that in a 3,000 person university, the vast majority of people don't know each other. So internal social capital in a big organization and a complex organization is very important. So building your network inside the organization, I always say to people, is 50% of what you need to do, which is why the GLP are doing that.
And there does tend to be some negative connotations about the term social capital or about networking, that some people mistake that for being exploitive or trying to take advantage of other people. But what I say is that that's not how social capital can work, because as a form of capital, you're producing something that is durable, that can exist into the future. And if you're exploitive, well, you're not producing anything of value. So you can't produce social capital. If you're being exploitive, you can only do it by giving and caring and helping with other people, because that does leave lasting value. And so just again, this comes back to that communication piece of how do we help people to understand what this is when they're not used to thinking about the importance of it and how it functions as well. So should we move on to John? John has a question, and we'll come to Tara after that.
Hi, Heather. Thanks very much. I really enjoyed your presentation. Our
Thank you.
world is heading towards being more socially isolated, and with remote workplaces. I'm just kind of wondering, do you see companies explicitly building social capital within or organizations, putting any energy into doing exactly that, explicitly building and realizing the value of it? And how are they doing it? Or is it just kind of left up to the individual to kind of say, well, okay, the smart individual who understands your message to go and do it? Or, I mean, I know you're doing it in your university, but what about other companies across the world, other nonprofits, other schools, other things?
Well, I would like to see it done on an institutional basis and on an individual development basis. So, for instance, if you're in a very small not-for-profit, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, the Taylor Bennett Foundation itself, for instance, has, I think, 4 employees or something. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
the it- they all know each other anyway inside a small organization. But I think that every line manager should have it as their responsibility in every size of organization, that the people who work for them should have a development plan about their building their social capital, as well as a development plan about building their human capital. Where do you not know people? One of the things I do a lot is counsel people who are trying to become directors of public companies. I've served on public company boards in the UK and the US now for more than 10 years, I don't know, 15 years or something. And it's a question I get a lot. I also led a campaign called the 30% Club that was launched in 2010 that now works all over the world, which I helped set up, which is about getting more women on boards. And so I get asked
Mm-hmm.
that question a lot. And what I say to people is, right, if you want to work out how to get onto a public company board, first of all, get a list of all the public companies in your country, and then work out which are the ones that you are completely out of the question. So, for instance, if you've got no understanding of financial services, you'll never ever work in financial services, and so on and so on. And then you get down to a manageable list, and there might be some that you have issues with, gambling or alcohol or whatever. If you have issues, and then get down to a manageable list, and then look at it and be realistic. If you've never served on a board before, you're not going to be put on the board of Microsoft or Roblox or whatever. And then, having got down to a sort of sensible list, then you get a list of all of those people's directors, and then work out who do you know that knows them, and work your social capital strategy out. So I teach people to sort out their own social, and it is left to individuals a lot, but I do teach people to work out their own social capital strategy. But I think it should be made the responsibility of every line manager, as I said, to develop the social capital of their. I frequently hear,
Yeah.
I encourage people. And I give you two very good examples. One is the Schlumberger example. I can't remember what Schlumberger is called these days, but they're still doing this. They worked out that they needed to build the social capital, and they could build the social capital and the human capital at the same time by bringing everyone together for this program. But the second example I was going to give you is GlaxoSmithKline. This is obviously a big pharmaceutical company that had a lot of success in drugs, and particularly in cancer drugs. One of the things that social capital is very good at doing is producing innovation. And a lot of that is linked to media richness theory, which shows us that 85% of communication is non-verbal. So you and I at the moment, John, are having a much better interaction than if you just phoned me or if you emailed me. Email, in fact, is the least rich medium of any communication. And it means, and you know, we're interviewing for a new vice chancellor at the moment, and I have to fly back to be on the official interview panel in Scotland in 2 weeks' time. And I really did say, why do I have to do this? Why can't I not stay here and dial in? But it's because of this business of media richness theory and interaction. So I'm going to build a better relationship and make better judgments of people if I'm actually physically in the room with them. And what Glaxo did, even when they were struggling and financially and they didn't really have the money, they brought all of their, and they still do this, all of their scientists together twice a year physically and put them in a hotel somewhere and get them together. And that really influenced my design of the GLP, that they all had to go somewhere for a week together because I'd seen this great example at Glaxo.
Yeah. So, but to follow up on that, you know, building your network. I mean, LinkedIn seems to be kind of where it's at for professional world. Other than face to face, which is obviously the best way of doing it. But your next alternative is LinkedIn.
Well, I think the next, yes, I mean, interestingly, about the use of the word alternative is derived from the Latin alter, alternate, which means one or the other. And I don't think it's about one or the other, as in the person or the thing. And I think it's about, there are a range of things you can do. But my position, my starting point would be, first of all, what you want to achieve. Before you get to the execution of building your network, what do you want to achieve by building it? Does it need to be a professional thing? Does it need to be our head of business development here is an absolute textbook example of how to build social capital for business development purposes. She's basically gone through every facet of her life. Where did she go to university? Where did she do this? Where did she do that? Who did her husband work with? I mean, literally, and mapped out all the connections she has, and then worked out where the university needs to target, including who is she connected to on LinkedIn. But the other way around is, who are the targets? So who are the companies that you want to work for, or you want to contract with, or whatever? And then how many degrees of separation are you from them, in what way? And where are the linkages, which may be on LinkedIn and may not be on LinkedIn? So it is about, you know, Granovetter's work is all based on the strength of weak ties. It's not who we know well that is the real value to us. It's who do they know? And who are you linked to on a degree of separation?
Yeah. Well, thank you.
No, you're very welcome. Thank you for the question.
Let's move to
These
Tara.
things are much better when they're interactive.
Yes.
Tara, great to see you. Feel free to ask a question.
Hi there, Heather. I'm really looking forward to meeting you in Dubai in March. I am actually doing my PhD on how the social capital factors that impact employability and entrepreneurship in youth and regional Australia, which, you know...
I definitely want to read that.
Well, I'm a while away yet. I'm still waiting on my ethics clearance, but that's a whole other story. It's really exciting. So I'm just obviously mostly in my literature review at the moment, writing my lit chapters at the moment. But I think this is an interesting context for us around density. You know, you were talking about a lot of your case studies have been in an education program where there's high density, there's high employability, and particularly around youth, they have very little context, and their density of people around them are generally more their parents or who's in that small town that they live in or whatever. And so I'm sort of kind of exploring this piece around, you know, if they have no human capital, so they've probably just been at school and maybe worked at McDonald's, you know, And how does that then translate to how they choose to build social capital, even have the conscious awareness to build social capital, unless they happen to fall into a program like university or whatever that supports them to do that, or has actually got social capital development built into a program. Certainly employers don't do it. It's not an intention within employers, particularly in regional Australia. And I'm sort of kind of just interested in this correlation between, you know, how do young people develop social capital? Do they focus on human capital development first, and I think that's been a really interesting tension that I'm finding in the research and also the practical programs that I'm delivering in Australia at the moment.
So first of all, young people on the whole don't recognise that if they've come from that kind of background and disadvantaged background, they don't recognise that they will recognise they don't know anybody in this or that field. As I said, I think if you have a look at my 2019 paper, you will see that I have, in all the people I cite in there, are all of the main bodies of work that look at disadvantaged young people and their lack of understanding of needing a network. They might recognize that they need to know more people, but they can't see that it's something that they could actually do anything about. And that's if they recognize it, which a lot of them necessarily. And the concept that and then you get very trite comments like, oh, well, typical, they're getting a job because their dad knows someone or whatever. And what I have to explain to people is their dad knowing someone might have got them on the list or it might have got them an interview. It will categorically in 2026 not get them a job because companies are very, very nervous about hiring. As I said, hiring is a risk-weighted decision, and they'll please a stakeholder by giving somebody an interview, but they will not give them a job. And the thing to do is work out where do you want to get to. First, and the hardest thing for them is, okay, if you could have a connection, who would you have a connection with? And when I speak to, for instance, I've taught how to build a network classes to, for instance, newly qualified lawyers, and they were like, well, we want to meet the top clients, and we want these mega senior connections. I was like, no, you don't. What you want to do is look around the room. Half the people in private practice will go in-house in the next 5 years, and they will be the people handing out the work in 5 years after that. So actually, do you know what? Build relationships you're already in a self-selecting group of people who are lawyers at a good firm. These are the people that you need to build social capital with now, and you need to build it for 10 years time. And I actually, funny enough, in my book, in Careers Advice for Ambitious Women, I won't spoil it by telling you what they are, but there are 3 questions I ask myself about people when I meet new people. I put them through a 3-question test, and if they don't pass the test, they don't get added to my phone book. And I'm absolutely ruthless about that because I'm 63 and I can't cope with knowing too many people, and maintaining a network is hard enough. So what you have to do with young people is, first of all, get them to recognize that they need this. Can I strongly recommend to you the work of David? Let me just look this up for you. Hang on a minute. There's a project going on in America at the moment that is where an academic has actually started to deliberately intervene to give social capital to undergraduates who from very disadvantaged backgrounds. I will find it and send it to you. But you basically have to design interventions for young people to A, explain to them why they need to do it, and B, explain to them how to do it.
Yeah, thank you. That's actually, we've been funded by the federal government around a 12-month program last year doing exactly that. And actually social capital was the component or the core fundamental of the program, was actually helping them understand what it meant, what to look for to create it. And actually that was interesting, the point you made about mapping your BD, mapping it. That's exactly one of the exercises we made them do, was we actually made them sit down and went, who do you know in your school? What are their parents? Do you know them? Your parents, your friends, your neighbours? After they've set their intentions, and then go, okay, which one of those can you go and talk to help you do that next thing, and how to build that relationship and build that trust with. And it's been interesting. We're still early days, we're only 12 months in, but I'd be interested to go back and do a bit of a study in reflection in a couple of years and see where they get with that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And there's you'll see in is a degree enough paper. There are lots of both my paper and other people's papers that I cite have got questionnaires that are deliberately designed for that to measure it. Do you know anybody that can lend you money? Do you know anybody that could help you get a job? Do you know? And then you measure these things over time.
Brilliant. That's very helpful. Thank you so much.
Well, we've got about 3 minutes left. So if you have any questions, make sure you get them in very quickly before we run out of time. There is a comment in the chat from Pitsy talking about, they say, I think these principles would be 100% useful for business owners and entrepreneurs, and asking your thoughts. I think you've talked about this a little already, Heather. Did you have anything else you'd like to add about the importance of these principles for business and entrepreneurs?
Yes, I mean, I think that it is something that here, interestingly, in our incubator, we have a new business incubator. We have one in Scotland that I set up in 2018 and one here that I set up in 22. That I do go and talk to our entrepreneurs about the importance. And again, it's a bit like young people. They don't necessarily, they know that they need to know people. The thought that you could actually, that social capital is something that you could actually create, maintain, measure. People honestly think that you go through life, you go to school and you meet a few people, and you go to university, you meet a few people, and you go out to work and you meet a few people, and you go to the pub and you meet a few people, and that is how social capital arises. Social capital doesn't arise like that. No, I absolutely wanted to meet Nicholas Tangen, who's probably not on any of your lists about someone that you desperately want to meet. He runs Norway's sovereign wealth fund. And they have a specialist part of it that funds research. And I literally I almost had a photograph of this. Obviously, there's targeting and there's stalking. I didn't go down the second route, but I knew who I wanted to meet and why I wanted to meet them. And I just needed to find someone that could introduce me to him. There must have been people who knew him. And then I worked out where, who knew him that I knew, and then which of those would have the greatest leverage with him, because obviously not all leverage will be the same. And I do think that the concept of doing it's a strategic building a network is a strategic. There's a strategic part of it, and then there's an executional part of it. And I think teaching people the strategic part is the thing that is so difficult. And that's, I think, what we have to do with business leaders is teach them the strategic part. First of all, before just going to endless drinks parties trying to meet people or endless business connection meetings, start out with who do you want to meet? And maybe they're not going to be at those. Saying no is a life skill. We all only have 168 hours in the week, and that includes sleeping. So actually going to endless so-called networking events, I think, is a waste of time unless you know exactly who you want to meet and why.
And Ed De Jesus has got a great story. He runs Social Capital Builders in the United States, and he works with young people who quite often might have done an apprenticeship or an internship. And then he asks them, well, who do you know? Like, who are you keeping in contact with from these positions that you had? You met a whole lot of industry leaders often through these roles that you had, and quite often none. They haven't maintained any of those connections. And so that awareness, like you're saying, like the awareness that this is something that you can and should be doing if you want to achieve things in life, doesn't seem to be particularly high for most people. So it's a great story.
Right, well, yeah. And thank you very much, everybody.
Yes, thanks everybody. We've run out of time. We hope to see you in Dubai in March. There is a virtual option for anybody who can't travel to Dubai. There is a virtual day before the conference. So all the information is on the link that I posted previously, and I'll include a link also in the email that we send as a follow-up. So Heather, thanks so much for your time in giving this presentation. It's absolutely fascinating and certainly had me paying attention to every word. So thanks everybody for taking part, and look forward to the next one.